This is an in-depth tutorial on how to map notes. We will begin with an overview of the dialog, and then follow that with 3 use cases showing the different mappings, and finally we will have a summary of the different mappings. Here we see the notes dialog. On the left, we will always see the legacy notes. In order to access the actions, you would select a legacy note, one or more, right-click, and the actions would appear. For any note that is selected on the left grid, the box below it will show the text for that note or notes. The right grid contains the template notes or the mapped notes. If there's a single line with nothing under it, it will be simply a template note that will be inserted. If there are 2 lines, such as the MBD2 title block that has an indented line or lines under it, that represents a mapping between the legacy and the template note. As with the left grid, when you select any line, you will have the text shown in the box below. This note mapping scenario will demonstrate how the PD Porter can be used to create a simple mapping to insert template notes into a part or parts that contains no general notes of its own. We've already opened the legacy and template or start part. Notice that the legacy part selected contains no notes, which is reflected in the empty grid. Notice that the template part or start part contains a number of notes. The default operation is that the template notes will be inserted into the legacy note in the order for which they are shown in the grid. Through the PD Porter, you may not rearrange this order, so it's important that you know your start part and edit your start part accordingly. The user may wish to not insert these notes. In order to do that, the user would click on the Ignore Notes button, which should disable all of the grids and the buttons. This behavior of the notes implies that the notes will not be mapped as part of the mapping process. If you wish to have the notes inserted, you would need to uncheck this option. This note mapping scenario will show the default note mapping for unique template and legacy notes, as well as common notes. We will also show a method to override these default mappings and a way to reposition the legacy notes. Notice that we've already opened the start part and the legacy part. On the left grid, we can see that the legacy part contains quite a few uniquely named notes. Remember that when you select a note, the text for that note will be shown below. In the right grid, we see that there are a number of unique template notes, as well as some with the same name. The default operation on the same name notes is to retain the text from the legacy file, the legacy note. For example, the text on the MBD2 title block comes from the legacy, regardless of whether I click on the first row, the template, or the second row. It is showing you where the text is coming from. Also, the position will be retained from the template file. Now, let's assume that we've made a change to our start part. In this situation, we may not wish to retain the text from a legacy note. So, for example, assume we've changed the title block. We wish to keep the title block from the template. In order to do this, we need to override this mapping. First, right-click on the legacy note and choose Remove Legacy Note. Another alternative would be to select the template note and right-click and clear all subnotes. Either one will perform the same action. When the note is pushed back from the template side to the legacy side, notice it's colored purple. This is just a visual reminder that you will actually be retaining the template note, not the legacy note. Now, also recall that when you have a legacy note, all of the template notes will be inserted first, and then the legacy notes will follow. If you wish to change this order, you have to specifically do this. Let's assume that I want the legal notice to be placed below the banner. I will select Banner on the right and Legal Notice on the left. When I right-click, I can now position this note below the banner. Notice that when I do, again, the color coding is pointing out that this is a legacy note that you have placed in this position. If I wish to undo that, I can simply remove the legacy note. This note mapping scenario will show several additional mapping options as well as alternate mapping options. In addition, we will show the reset operation. Once again, we've already opened the start part and the legacy part. Notice here that our legacy part contains a number of general notes, and note 10 contains the proprietary note. What we wish to do is map these general notes from the legacy part into our start part notes. You may recall that by using default naming convention note_1, we cannot keep these names. If we apply this and these notes are pushed to the bottom, they will have to be renamed to something else. Of course, in this situation, what we really want is the text from our legacy part to be retained with our new start part notes. In order to do this, we will map note_1 into note 1, note_2 into note 2, and on and on. First, select note 1 and note_1 in the right and left grids respectively. Then in the left grid, right-click and select Replace Text, which tells you that you will be mapping note 1 by retaining the text from note_1. Then we would wish to do this with note 2 and note 3 all the way down. Now, an alternate method for this might be that you wish to not map each of these individually. It's quite a tedious process. So what we can do is we can reset back to our initial state and start over again. So the alternate method would be to simply move all of our notes, except our proprietary note, into note 1. Group select the notes on the left, select note 1 on the right, and then when you right-click for your options, you'll select Replace Text. Notice now that you have a number of legacy notes shown under note 1. If I click on the individual notes, it will show that note's text. But if I click on note 1, it will show the combined text, which is what will end up when you actually perform the mapping. Recall that the text will be from the legacy part, so it won't necessarily be this exact note, it will be what is part specific. Now for the proprietary note, it might be that you're not sure which one you wish to keep. It might be that the user has to determine this on a case-by-case basis. If that is the situation, it would be very difficult to choose to either retain one or retain the other. In that case, what you could do is combine the text, and it will actually merge both proprietary notes. When this occurs and you do the mapping, you will receive a message in the record log that tells you that you need to go in and manually choose per part which one of those proprietary note texts you wish to keep. In other words, the merging of text will allow you to retain both and then make a part-by-part decision after the fact. For the last note, note 0, we might choose to say, I don't need the legacy part. The start part has the proper information, the ASCII standard. So in this case, we can right-click on the note 0 and select Delete. Now what delete will do, in addition to putting the strike through, is tell you that if that note exists in the legacy part, it will be deleted. If the note is not found in the legacy part, nothing will happen.
Now to summarize our mapping actions in the Note tab. First of all, there are 3 types of note. Unique template notes only found in the template file, unique legacy notes only found in the legacy file, or notes found in both files, which we will call same name notes. The default action for the unique template notes is that they will be inserted, and they will be inserted before the legacy notes. They will retain their placement. These unique template notes are reflected in the right grid in this manner shown here. The default actions for the unique legacy notes is that they will be moved to the bottom of the model tree. They will retain their placement, and if the legacy note was named using the default naming conventions, they will be renamed. These notes will appear in the left grid in the manner shown here. And finally, the default action for the same name notes. In this instance, the note text will come from the legacy note and the placement from the template note. It is reflected as shown here with the purple showing the template note, and then you have the legacy note indented showing that there is some action or some mapping happening. Now the mapping options for the template and legacy note are as follows. A template note text can be replaced with the note text of one or more legacy notes. The template note text can also be merged with one or more legacy note text. What that one means is that the template note text will be in the final note with the legacy note text below it. So it's a merged operation. The user will have to go in and determine if he wants to keep all the text or some of the text. Remember that in all of these actions, they will retain the placement from the template. Options that are only found on the legacy note can be delete or undelete a legacy note, or you can position the legacy note. Remember, we said the legacy note would be pushed to the bottom. If you wish to change that, you may select a legacy note and a template note and position that legacy note with respect to the template note. The only mapping options available for same name notes is to override the automatic mapping. So instead of taking the text from the legacy note, you will take the text from the template note. One last point. When you are doing mapping options between the two, the legacy and the template note, the options that appear are dependent on what is selected. Notice in the top that we have all four options. But in the second one, we only have two options. This is because in the right grid, the user has selected something that has already been mapped as a replace. So you can only continue to replace multiple notes into one. Similarly, in the bottom note, there is combined text because the one that is selected is already a combination mapping.